Keek on the mic, keek on the mic. Keek on the mic, keek on the mic. People, this the intro. Sacramento, California, born and raised. In Antelope is where I spend most of my days. Talk bad about my team, you must be a clown. This is Keek on the mic, so you know you better bear down. Bear down.
Hey, what's going on, Bears fans? Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Keek on the Mic, the podcast all about the Chicago Bears. Like always, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. Okay, Bears fans, today we have a very, very special guest. He is a national NFL insider and host on KOA 850 AM in Denver. Today's special guest on Keek on the Mic is Benjamin Allbright. How you doing, Benjamin?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to come on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no worry. Anytime.
So the first thing I'm curious to ask you, obviously you're a Broncos insider, so I wanted to ask you, after one season in Denver, how would you evaluate Russell Wilson's play?
Well, I would certainly say that it's not been up to par. The expectation with what they traded for him and the contract that they gave him, they certainly expected better play than they got. I would say that some of that is on Russell Wilson. Some of that is on the coaching staff and Nathaniel Hackett. We certainly saw over the course of the last two games, Broncos offense looked a lot better once he was gone. Some of that is on injuries. I think a lot of people don't know that Russell Wilson had a torn lat in his throwing arm. It's not any one particular thing, and I don't know what the floor and ceiling for Russell Wilson are anymore. I think we need to get another training camp, kind of evaluate that. But I do think it was interesting that during training camp, he didn't look bad. So my gut says that he can return to, 90-95% of what it was that he was. Obviously there's decline that comes with age, and we'll have to see who the next head coach of the Denver Broncos is and what they're able to do with him.
Right. And after one season, are you concerned about Russell Wilson at all, or do you think he will have that bounce back next season?
I tend to lean toward having the bounce back. I think that's mostly because he's got a decade-long pedigree in the league of playing at a near Hall of Fame level. There's never been subpar play before outside of a thumb injury. And even then, the play wasn't nearly as bad as it was this past year. So I tend to kind of lean toward the side that there'll be a bounce back year. Now, that said, nothing's ever written in stone. We don't know anything till it happens, but I guess that's the direction I lean for now.
So, Denver is obviously in a search for a new head coach. You mentioned it already. Who is the front runner to be the next Denver Broncos head coach?
I think there's three names that are more heavily in play than the others. That's not to say that some of these other guys can't convince them through the interview process. But I think the three main names are Jim Harbaugh, Dan Quinn, and Sean Payton. I don't know that Sean Payton necessarily wants to go to Denver, but we'll see. He's obviously got interviews everywhere. Jim Harbaugh, I think he prefers Michigan, but they've not really shown a willingness to pay him yet. So Denver is definitely in play. And then, of course, Dan Quinn. Dan wanted the Denver job last cycle, pulled his name everywhere when he didn't get it. I believe he interviewed in Chicago as well, but pulled his name in the from everybody's candidacy and went back, and now he's the highest paid defensive coordinator in football.
Out of the candidates you just listed to me, which one is a personal favorite for you that you would like to see the Denver Broncos hire?
I think I'd be fine with either Jim Harbaugh or Dan Quinn. I don't particularly want Sean Payton. There's a bunch of reasons for that, but if they hire him, they hire him. I like Dan Quinn. I've known Dan Quinn for a number of years, so there's probably a personal bias there. As far as Jim Harbaugh goes, obviously his pedigree of success has followed him everywhere. He's not been successful. There's not been a stop where he hasn't been successful. So I think I'd be fine with either of the two of those. With Sean Payton, a little concerned. There are people talk about Dan Quinn and not having an offense outside of Kyle Shanahan. Well, in 2018 with Steve Sarkisian, Dan Quinn scored more points than Sean Payton did in 7 different seasons that he coached. If you go back and you look at Bountygate when he was suspended, the 3 years following Bountygate, the Saints scored significantly fewer points with Sean Payton in there than they did with Vitt and Cromer running things. if you obviously there's the Bounty Gate scandal. He quit on his football team and then decided, to rather than deal with the cap crunch. He's never been successful outside of Drew Brees. So there's some glaring things with Sean Payton that I think the legend of Sean Payton outpaces the actual production.
And there's always been some speculation about Jim Harbaugh. Obviously, you mentioned him as one of the candidates for Denver Broncos. Will he actually leave Michigan though?
I think so. I think this year, if he doesn't get because he gave a lot of money back to the university during COVID. They said they needed to cut his salary. He gave it back so they could keep everybody on staff, all that kind of stuff. And now, he's gotten them past Ohio State twice in a row. They're in the college football playoffs. I think he's like, okay, we're past the COVID stuff. It's time to put my salary in line with the top head coaches and kind of respect me with the S being a dollar sign. And, I think if Michigan doesn't do that, I do believe he'll leave. If Michigan does do that, I do believe he'll stay. So I do believe that the ball is in Michigan's court on that.
Yeah, because for a couple of years now, Jim Harbaugh's name has been on a lot of teams' radar. I know that when the Chicago Bears were looking for a new head coach, he was also on our radar. He went back to Michigan. So it's going to be interesting to see these next couple of months if he actually does, in fact, leave Michigan to come back to the NFL. So I want to move on and ask you this, and this is for, I guess, my sanity and the rest of the Chicago Bears fan sanity as well. What is the status of Aaron Rodgers' future in Green Bay?
Unknown, up in the air. I tend to believe that he's going to come back. I don't think that Aaron Rodgers wants to go out like that. I think, personally, I think, and I use this term respectfully, I think there's too much ego there. And there has to be. I mean, when you're one of the best in the world at what you do, you have to have an ego about it. You have to believe in yourself that you are that. I don't think Aaron Rodgers wanted to go out that way. I'm curious as to what they do because I think there's going to be a couple of staff changes there. So I'm curious as to see what those staff changes are. But overall, I don't think he wants to go out that way. I think he comes back, but we'll see. Aaron Rodgers is his own guy, and he marches to the beat of his own drum, and certainly hasn't exactly made the decisions that everybody thought he was going to make before.
I know personally, myself and other Bears fans want to see Aaron Rodgers gone, and rightfully so. The dude absolutely owns the Chicago Bears. So hopefully he leaves, but I can definitely see him coming back to Green Bay as well. Benjamin, how do you evaluate Justin Fields' play in year two?
Well, that's a really good question. I think he showed definitive improvement once they catered the offense around his legs. And I think if you have an offense that's centered around that and centered around the threat of him running, and it will make him or it will set him up for better success as a passer. I don't think that he developed as much as a passer as Chicago fans would have you believe. The stats are a little bit different, but if you go back and you watch the tape, his eyes are still a little slow, going through reads, going through progressions. And, I think he's going to have a specific type of offense. We talked about Russell Wilson earlier, and one of the things that made Russell Wilson unsuccessful at Denver is that Russ tried to reinvent himself as kind of Drew Brees. And Russell Wilson really needs an offense that's run heavy, builds off play action, and buys extra time for him to make those reads, right? And I think Justin Fields kind of has some of the same issues. The knocks on him coming out of college were he was just surrounded by such incredible athletes at every, he had incredible wide receivers, incredible offensive line that he got away with some things that, that he wasn't going to at the pro game where everything's faster. And so, you get to the pro game and you see, how that goes. And, some of that is on the talent around him and some of that's on him. I mean, Bears fans love to try to berate me a little bit for that stuff, but it's important to be honest about a guy. If you could be objective and honest and say, okay, these are his flaws. How do we work around that to make him the best version of himself? Then you can get the best version of himself. And we saw this past year, like, for instance, again, with Russell Wilson, that if you don't do that, it'll be a disaster. And if you do work around him, well, you can look at the previous 10 years with Russ and your Hall of Fame career. So, with Justin Fields, I'm not saying that he can't, he can't be successful in the NFL. I'm just saying that he currently has some limitations. He's got a rocket of an arm, but he doesn't read the middle of the field, in the intermediate depths particularly well. And he's got slow eyes. He's on a read too long before transitioning to the next read. So, I think if he can find ways to kind of speed that up, I think he'll be better. I think he's a fun guy. Certainly listen to him speak. He seems like a fun guy. And we have seen guys that struggled in the past game take that evolution Jalen Hurts, for example. Jalen Hurts was on his way out in Philadelphia. They switched Shane Steichen, switched the offense to cater to his legs. All of a sudden, he got a lot better. They got the offseason. They worked a passing offense around him, and look at the Eagles now. So, I think part of it is getting the right talent around you, and part of it is building the quarterback and building an offense around them so they can be successful.
When you look at Justin Fields, do you feel that he made actually enough strides this season to prove that he can be the Bears franchise quarterback moving forward?
I don't know if that's exactly the way I'd phrase it. I would phrase it as he earned himself another year. He earned himself the right to have an offense built around him. And so that's the way I'd look at it. I don't know if he's a franchise quarterback or not. If I were betting my job on it, I'm not sure I'd bet my job on it. That said, if I was already the coach, I'm already the general manager, then my job is already bet on it. So I would, you know what I mean? So like that's the thing. Like if I were a new coach or GM coming in, I would have to look at the number one overall pick and make sure that there's not somebody better out there. But if I'm already the GM and I'm already the head coach, my job's already hitched to this quarterback that I have. So I think that I would probably build around him.
And you just mentioned that the Bears can have the opportunity to build around him. They have a boatload of money, the number one overall pick. What do you expect from Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears this offseason?
I expect them to trade down out of one. I expect them to try to multiply their picks, continue to build a baseline of talent. That defense needs a lot of help. You need a little bit on the offensive line. You need another receiver. There are definitive, as Bears fans well know, there are definitive holes on that roster that need to be addressed. And I think if it were me, I would try to find a way to always be stacking an extra pick in the next year so that the war chest is always loaded. There's a lot of talent in this draft. This draft is, you can move down a little bit and still get significant talent. So if you find somebody thirsty enough for a quarterback, like for instance, CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, although I think Young's going to go to the Texans at 2. If you can convince Carolina to come up, you can still get plenty of talent and probably get a pick in next year's draft as well, so that you've always got the war chest going replenished, and that sets you up going forward for a lot of success.
And you just mentioned it, that you feel like the Bears will trade back in the 2023 NFL draft. For those teams that are looking to trade up with the Chicago Bears to try to get the number one overall pick, what will a trade package look like?
Well, it'll be multiple number ones. I mean, it all really depends on where you're trading from. If you're Carolina, obviously you're going to give up your early first round pick, but you're probably giving up a future first in the coming years, and then some additional picks on top of it, maybe a 2, and then maybe a future 3. The point value charts. There are 4 or 5 different value charts out there, and I would suggest if you just kind of average what those values are or triangulate those values, you get a good approximation of roughly what the compensation would be. It's just a question of where the acquiring team is moving from in terms of compensation. The further back they are, the more you're going to get.
And I wanted to get your opinion on this. Chicago sports insider David Kaplan reported that the Colts have already begun establishing the framework of a deal that includes, I guess, Michael Pittman, another player, and a bevy of picks. Is there actually any truth to this?
Okay, no, there's not. And I don't know Mr. Kaplan, so I don't want to, besmirch his reputation or anything, but that is a rumor that got put out there by a fake rumor account, a guy called CJ Golson, who puts these absolutely fake stories out there to kind of catch journalists that aren't doing their job. Does that mean the Colts won't trade up? No, it doesn't. And I do believe the Colts will explore trying to move up, but the Colts don't even have a head coach in place right now, right? And they don't know that the general manager is necessarily going to be there. If they hire Jim Harbaugh, Chris Ballard might be gone and Ed Dodds might be the general manager. So the idea that, that they've put together a trade package, it doesn't make any sense based on the fact that they don't have their personnel, their vision, and what they're going to do in place. Why would you trade up to number 1 if you've got a head coach that doesn't necessarily believe in, whatever it is that's going to be there? So, and then also I talked to somebody in Indianapolis who absolutely laughed at the notion. So, aside from all that, let's just look at the logic, but let's take sourcing out of it for a minute and just look at the logic. The logic doesn't make sense that they would be doing it. Now, again, could they eventually do that? Absolutely. Are they doing that right now? No, they are not.
Another thing I want to ask you, and we talked a lot about the Chicago Bears and what they should do with the number 1 overall pick. Former GM Mike Tannenbaum thinks the Bears should trade Justin Fields and take Bryce Young at number 1 overall. What is your initial reaction to that? And do you think it's actually a possibility that Ryan Poles may consider the fact of trading Justin Fields this offseason?
Well, it would be irresponsible of him not to consider it. It would be irresponsible of him not to explore every option. You would have to believe that Bryce Young is and will be significantly better than Justin Fields. And if you do that, then if you do believe that, then yeah, you should make that move. Bears fans are going to be invested in their guys, so they're going to laugh that off at the beginning. But if we step outside fandom for just a second and we look at this and we say, let's take Bryce Young out of it and let's go back a couple of years and pick a different quarterback. If it's Jared Goff or Carson Wentz, do you do that deal? Probably not, right? You think about it, but probably not. You go back and you look at Patrick Mahomes. Do you do that deal? Yeah, you probably do, right? So I think that, you definitely do. I think that if you look at, if you take a minute and you step outside it for a second, you say, okay, who is Bryce Young and what does he have the potential to become? Or Will Levis or CJ Stroud or Hendon Hooker or Anthony Richardson, whomever, right? You look at the framework of what can that quarterback become? How long will it take him to get there and what can he become? And if the answers to that are the next Pat Mahomes in 2 years, then yeah, you trade Justin Fields in a heartbeat and you get better with the other guy. If the answer is I'm not sure, or the answer is I'm not sure we believe in the guy, with Bryce Young, Stroud, whatever, then you say, okay, we're going to stick with our guy until we find a guy we believe in, whether that's Justin or whether that's someone else. So I think that the Bears absolutely should explore that. And I think they should ask themselves hard questions. There are things you don't want to put in the public domain because you don't want to undermine the confidence of your current quarterback. But you do have to ask yourself these questions like, is Bryce Young or CJ Stroud the next Pat Mahomes? If they are, dude, you have to trade Fields. You have to get you have to do that deal. So like I said, I think it's irresponsible not to consider it. I think you should go through all your options and know what they are. And at the end, ask yourself, do we believe that Justin Fields is better than these guys? Or do we believe these guys are better than Fields? And then you have your answer right in front of you.
And Ryan Poles mentioned it in his press conference, the end of year press conference. He said he would have to absolutely be blown away to take a quarterback. And I definitely agree with you. You have to look at it at least. And, if you're convinced that they will be better than Justin Fields at the end of the day, then I guess you'll have to make a move. And I know I'm a fan, so I have to put that aside and be just realistic. I guess you do have to look at it. Do I like it at the moment? No, I'm a Justin Fields guy, but I think you just have to be realistic to the fact that you have to take a look at one of those quarterbacks. I wanted to go back to free agency, and you mentioned that Bears need a lot of help on defensive line. One of the targets that I think they should really look into is Draymond Jones. Obviously, he plays for the Denver Broncos. If they did explore that option, what would they be getting in a guy like Draymond Jones?
Well, he's played the kind of the 4-eye out to like the 7 tech in a 34 there, since he's been there. If he was going to play in a 4-3. You'd probably use him as the under tackle, but he can play. He can play most of those positions. You're getting a guy that's a bit of a tweener, somewhere in between a right defensive end and a defensive tackle in terms of body type. His production comes in chunks. He'll pick on teams that are bad, but he doesn't usually get high production against players that are his equal or better. He gets chunks of production against bad players, and so he will feast on those. He's going to want to be paid top dollar. I don't know if the Broncos are going to be willing to do that. I think it's tough. I like Draymond a lot. I think he's a good player. I don't think he's a great player, and so I think that if you're going to look at him, you need to look at where it is that he wins, how he wins, and if that's a fit for what you do. And then if you're willing to pay him top dollar for the position, because that's what it's going to take.
And another guy I have on my radar is, of course, Payne from the Washington Commanders. Is there any chance that he actually gets out of Washington now?
Man, I would have said no, but it's Washington, so you just never know, right? And I think Payne's a stud, so I would. That's a good one. I would be all over. I would be all over that, especially in an Eberflus system. I think he could succeed. So, I sit here and I look at this and I say, there's no way Washington lets a player of that caliber go. And then I also look at it and I say, it's Washington, so of course they're going to screw this up.
Yeah, and Benjamin, before I let you go, who is your pick for the Super Bowl this year?
In the preseason, I had the Bills and the Packers. Obviously, the Packers didn't even make the playoffs, so I whiff on that side. Looking at what San Francisco is doing right now, they're pretty tough. Even with with Brock Purdy in there, they're tough. So I think it comes down to San Fran or Philly. My gut says bet on San Francisco because they've been there before. But Philadelphia's been playing lights out all year. So I'll go with San Francisco on the NFC side, and then I'll just stick with Buffalo on the AFC side. Although I think Cincinnati and Kansas City have good shots as well.
Well, Benjamin, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Absolutely, man. Anytime.
Before I let you guys go, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. Make sure you follow me on all my social media platforms, and make sure you share this episode of Keek on the Mic with every single Bears fan that you know. But other than that, be back for an all new Bears podcast right here on Keek on the Mic. Thanks, guys, and bear down.
You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't Keek on the mic. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't Keek on the mic. You can go and subscribe, cause I be on it right. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't Keek on the mic.